From breakthrough technologies to visionary leadership, we will unlock the trends, the tactics, and dive into the minds of the industry's most influential leaders.
WION brings you this special series to uncover what drives them in a candid talk show, WION Business Masters.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching GRAVITAS with me, Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. Our top story tonight on GRAVITAS focuses on the big question that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky would definitely want an answer to, quite desperately perhaps. Is Donald Trump ready to dump the Ukrainian leader? NATO, after all, is officially taking over the coordination of military aid to Ukraine from the United States. We tell you what else is brewing behind the scenes and what all of this might mean for Zelensky and for the Russia-Ukraine war. Here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show. America's horror story continues to haunt its children as school terror wreaks havoc. We get you the numbers and the bigger picture and the latest on the latest act of violence. Is wine good for you? Are you a wine lover? We tell you what research says. All this and more coming up. On GRAVITAS tonight, our top story focuses on a key question. Is Donald Trump ready to ditch Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as NATO officially takes over the coordination of military aid to Ukraine from the US and the alliance steps in to play a more direct role in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict? In fact, this shift begs the immediate question, is this a sign of America actually distancing itself from Ukraine? What lies ahead? NATO's involvement signals a growing reliance on the collective strength of member countries. But will that be enough? Trump has long been a critic of the massive US military aid flowing into Ukraine. He called it excessive and vowed to end the war swiftly. On Monday, Trump said that he might still be able to make a deal between Russia and Ukraine before he takes office next month. Listen in.
We'll be talking to President Putin and we'll be talking to the representatives, Zelensky and representatives from Ukraine. We got to stop it. It's carnage.
As you just heard, Trump once again said that a ceasefire needs to be carried out in the Russia-Ukraine war. Whether that happens before or after him taking power remains to be seen. On the surface, NATO's takeover of military aid coordination might seem like a strategic pivot. But if the war does not end, can NATO take on the burden really? Because after all, America is the largest contributor within NATO, providing the majority of Ukraine's arms and support. In fact, the US contributes about 1/6 of NATO's annual budget. Washington finances 15.8% of the military alliance's yearly expenditure of around $3.5 billion. And these developments come at a time when the leaders of all of NATO's major members, like the UK, Germany, France, Spain, and its biggest defense spenders, are currently facing an uncertain future, sparking concerns about the future of European politics. So, without the US and its major players, the question that arises is, can NATO function as a cohesive alliance, let alone support Ukraine? And Trump's stance on NATO's contribution has been clear for years, in fact. During his first term, he threatened to withdraw from the alliance altogether, pushing NATO countries to commit 3% of their GDP to defense, far beyond the 2% target NATO had set. He's been clear about this. And if Trump follows through on his moves to limit US aid, can NATO realistically hold fort? Or will this simply be a futile gesture with little real impact on Ukraine's military efforts? Experts have long warned that Trump's presidency presents an uncertain future for Ukraine. If the US were to withdraw support, Ukraine would basically be left exposed without any major military assistance, leaving it vulnerable to Russia's continued territorial expansion. So when Trump returns to power, will Zelensky and Ukraine be left to fend for themselves in a war that it cannot win alone? Or will Zelensky look for a deal that is tilted heavily in favor of Russia because Ukraine's situation grows more dire by the day? As Russian forces gain ground, while morale within Ukraine's military continues to plummet, according to Russia's defense minister, Moscow is gaining around 30 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory a day, claiming further that Ukraine controls just around 25 to 30% of the Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops are struggling to replace fallen soldiers and new recruits are scarce. As of last month, Ukraine's military had lost around 57,000 soldiers, half of Russia's casualties, but still an alarming number for a much smaller country. Moreover, as Russian troops make steady advances, Ukraine faces the possibility of losing even more territory in the coming days and weeks. Russia is reportedly just 10 kilometers south of Kurakhov and just 3 kilometers from the outskirts of Pokrovsk. Both these cities are key to Ukraine's defenses in the east, and their fall will open doors for Russia to advance westwards towards central Ukraine. So with Trump's uncertain position as far as military aid is concerned, can Zelensky get Ukraine to regroup in time in order to reverse the losses? Or are they actually fighting a battle they simply cannot win? In recent weeks, the Biden administration committed a $988 million deal to Kiev in security assistance. But will that be enough remains the big question. Ukraine remains on the edge despite additional US aid. Pentagon and intelligence officials have reportedly made it clear that regaining lost territory from Russia will be an uphill battle and highly unlikely. As the conflict drags on, the uncertainty surrounding Trump's stance adds yet another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Perhaps one of the most significant unknowns is what security guarantees, if any, Ukraine can really expect from the US and NATO. As Ukraine faces growing pressure on the battlefield, with territory slipping away and resources dwindling, the question lingers on, can NATO provide Ukraine with the military and monetary guarantees it needs to survive in this conflict? Or without Trump, Zelensky is left with ever-decreasing bargaining chips? In the days ahead, one thing is certain: Ukraine's survival may depend on more than just military aid. It may just depend on a new kind of diplomacy. The stakes are high, and with Trump's presidency on the horizon, the future of Ukraine looks more uncertain than ever. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has acknowledged that Ukraine's military is currently unable to reclaim Crimea and the Donbas region from Russian occupation. Speaking to a French newspaper, Zelensky said that Ukraine's armed forces do not have the capability to oust Russian troops from occupied areas. He emphasized, however, that diplomatic pressure from the international community is the only viable option to push Moscow into negotiations. Zelensky told the French newspaper that Ukraine cannot just give up their territories and the Ukrainian constitution forbids them to do so, admitting, quote-unquote, de facto these territories are now controlled by the Russians. That's a huge admission. And that Ukraine does not have the strength to recover them, adding that Ukraine can only count on diplomatic pressure from the international community to force Russian President Vladimir Putin to sit down at the negotiating table. Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and has since taken control of around 80% of the Donbas region, including the Donetsk and Luhansk areas. In addition, Russian forces occupy parts of the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. A Ukrainian counter-offensive launched last year with the backing of Western military aid has failed to dislodge the Russian forces from these regions. Zelensky's comments have reportedly sparked debates about the future of Ukraine's territorial claims. Just last month, Zelensky said that Ukraine might abandon its goal of reclaiming these territories through military force if NATO membership was offered in return. However, the NATO has only confirmed that Ukraine will eventually be invited to join the alliance without specifying a timeline. In the year 2022, Zelensky issued a decree barring peace talks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Yet in his latest remarks, he said this stance may be subject to change. It's not about who sits across from you, it's about the position you are in when negotiating, quote unquote. Further quoting, I don't believe we are in a weak position, but we are also not in a strong one. That's what Zelensky further emphasized, emphasizing the importance of a peace plan, basically, adding that first Ukraine needs to develop a model, an action plan which can be presented to Putin or more broadly to the Russian people. Meanwhile, former US official Keith Kellogg, who will be the key advisor to President-elect Donald Trump, co-authored a plan before the November election. The plan basically proposed freezing the front line, suspending NATO membership discussions for Ukraine, and partially lifting Western sanctions on Russia. Under this proposal, the US would basically continue military support for Ukraine but would cut off aid if Zelensky refused to engage in peace talks. The Kremlin has made it clear, meanwhile, that peace is only possible if Ukraine agrees to surrender Crimea and the other 4 regions Russia claims as its own. Moscow's conditions including Ukraine withdrawing its forces from the cities of Kherson and Zaporizhia, which had a combined pre-war population of around 1 million people. Dmitry Peskov, the press secretary for Putin, has said that Russia does not want a ceasefire. It wants peace only after its conditions are met and all its goals are achieved. As the conflict drags on, Zelensky's admission marks a huge shift in Ukraine's strategy in a way and raises crucial questions about the path forward in its ongoing struggle against Russia. Our next story is about the school terror in the United States. The numbers are frightening. The impact of the gun terror is a horror story. And the worst part, it's impacting children. And they don't deserve this. Not at all. Let me first tell you about the latest act of violence. Late Monday morning, as you would know by now, gunfire erupted at a school in Wisconsin's capital city. The shooter opened fire, killing another student and a teacher, and wounding 6 others. The teacher and student were pronounced dead at the school. The shooter also died. What do we know about the shooter? Now that's the other part of this horror story. And here's why we're saying that. The shooter was a 15-year-old student. The shooter, identified by the police as Natalie Rapnoe, who also went by Samantha, was a student at the school. What prompted a student, a 15-year-old, to open fire? Also, you must know, in one way, the Madison attack is an outlier among US school and mass shootings. Why is that? Let me ask you this first. When was the last time you heard that the shooter was a girl? Women and girls are far less likely to carry them out as compared to male attackers, with studies basically showing only about 3% of all US mass shootings are perpetrated by females. In fact, according to the Madison police chief, identifying a motive is their top priority, but at this time, it appears that the motive was a combination of factors, quote unquote. Investigators are examining the girl's cell phone, computer, online posts, court records reportedly showing that the 15-year-old girl had a turbulent home life and that her parents divorced and remarried multiple times and that she had been enrolled in therapy. Police said Rapnoe used a pistol but have not yet said how it was obtained. President Joe Biden, in a statement, called the shooting shocking. He urged the Congress to act immediately. I'm quoting from his words, "Every child deserves to feel safe in their classroom." He goes on to say, students across our country should be learning how to read and write, not having to learn how to duck and cover. Absolutely, Mr. President, bang on. But haven't the students in America been doing exactly that all this while? It's a nightmare playing on loop day in and day out. According to the Washington Post school shooting tracker, over 31,000 children have been affected by a shooting on a K-12 campus during school hours this year alone. According to it, 21, that's the number of states where school shootings have taken place this year, in addition to the District of Columbia. School shootings have become a near daily occurrence in the United States, with 322 of them this year, according to the K-12 school shooting database. That's the second highest total of any year since 1966, topped only by last year's total of 349. School shootings once again bringing the focus back to gun control. The nerves of parents whose children are growing up, accustomed, unfortunately, to doing active shooter drills in their classrooms. Can you imagine what that's like? But then school shootings have done very little to actually move the needle as far as national gun laws are concerned. You know what the Dane County executive Melissa Agard said at Tuesday's press conference? She wanted to see stricter gun laws in Wisconsin. She said, I'm quoting, "Let us remember this fact. Gun violence is the #1 killer of children in this country." She went on to say that's a legacy we cannot accept. Her words stuck with me. How is it okay for gun violence to be the #1 killer of children in any country? Imagine the fear that students are living through on a daily basis, that they will be sitting in their class and a shooting can happen any second. How scary, right? And it's high time that changed. Shifting focus in a significant step in the India and China relationship, Ajit Doval, the National Security Advisor of India, met the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing to discuss the India-China border issue. The meeting between the leaders took place as part of the 23rd meeting of special representatives. There was no special representative dialogue in the last 5 years, given the Eastern Ladakh border row. Ajit Doval arrived in Beijing on Tuesday for the new edition of India and China's Special Representatives Dialogue. At the end of the meeting, both sides agreed on a 6-point consensus, including resumption of Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, cross-border river cooperation, and the Natala border trade. Both sides reiterated that the implementation work should continue on the solution reached between the two countries on border issues. They also reaffirmed their commitment to continue seeking a mutually acceptable package solution to the boundary issue. The consensus also included further refining the management and control rules in the border area and strengthening confidence-building measures. The two sides also agreed to continue to strengthen cross-border exchanges and cooperation, including promoting resumption of Indian pilgrimage to Tibet, China. Cross-border river cooperation and Natala border trade also agreed upon was the strengthening of the construction of the special representatives meeting mechanism. Further, the sides agreed to hold a new round of special representatives meeting in India next year. In his address at a symposium on the international situation and China's foreign relations in 2024 on Tuesday, the Chinese foreign minister said that the two sides agreed to step up strategic communication, safeguard peace and tranquility in the border areas, and strive to bring the bilateral relationship between the two countries back to the track of stable development at an early date. Chinese ambassador to India reiterated that China is ready to bring bilateral relations of the two countries back on track. He added that it is important for both countries to respect each other's core interests and work accordingly. Both countries completed disengagement process from the last two friction points of Demchok and Depsang in Ladakh under an agreement finalized in October this year. The agreement was finalized just days before Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping held talks on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in the Russian city of Kazan. And we have some breaking news coming in right this minute. An accident in Mumbai harbour involving an Indian Navy craft and a civil ferry has led to the deaths of as many as 13 people, as per the latest that's coming in, including 3 on board the naval craft. The Navy craft reportedly undergoing engine trials, lost control and collided with the passenger ferry, Neel Kamal. What we also know at this point, as the details continue to trickle in, is that the incident happened near the Gateway of India in Mumbai, that iconic landmark. The ferry, in fact, was reportedly carrying passengers from Gateway of India to Elephanta Caves. Now, the search and rescue efforts have been immediately launched as per the latest coming in. They've been launched by the Navy in coordination with the Coast Guard and the Marine Police. In fact, 4 naval helicopters, 11 naval craft and also 1 Coast Guard boat and 3 Marine Police boats are undertaking the rescue efforts. And we also know at this point that the survivors picked up by the Navy and civil craft in the area have been transferred to hospitals in the vicinity. Over 100 people have been rescued, and search and rescue efforts in the area are currently underway. We will continue to keep a close eye on those developments coming in. Shifting focus for now to Syria, following Bashar al-Assad fleeing the country after a rebel offensive headed by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS. All eyes are on what lies ahead, on the shape that the transitional government in the country will take. Here are the key developments and the implications.
Syria's conflict continues. Days after the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime, the UN's envoy to the country is highlighting the escalating clashes between Kurdish and Turkish-backed groups in the north.
The first major challenge is, of course, that the conflict has not ended. Yes, we are seeing a Syria that is stable at present in many parts. Many in Damascus tells me that the law and order improved significantly after 2 initial days of instability. But stability can be fragile in many parts of Syria.
The UN Security Council has called for an inclusive and Syrian-led political process to be initiated in the country. In a press statement, the council, that includes the United States and Assad's ally Russia, called on Syria and its neighbors to refrain from actions undermining regional security. The United States has said it has brokered an extension of a ceasefire to the end of the week between pro-Turkish fighters and Syrian Kurds at the flashpoint town of Manbij, and it was seeking a broader understanding with Ankara.
We will obviously look to see that ceasefire extended as far as possible into the future. And it came about through our ongoing diplomatic work with the SDF and with the government of Turkey. The initial ceasefire that was reached last week was brokered through our diplomatic engagements, and not just here at the State Department, but obviously we have coalition forces that operate inside Syria that have long-standing deconfliction mechanisms, in working with the government of Turkey and working with the SNA to try to make sure that forces, including U.S. forces, aren't put at risk.
Meanwhile, the military chief of HTS said the group will be the first to dissolve its armed wing and integrate it into armed forces. The military chief, Murhaf Abu Kasra, also added that Kurdish-held areas in Syria will be integrated under country's new leadership, saying that the group rejects federalism and that Syria will not be divided.
Regarding the area controlled by the SDF, God willing, it will be integrated under the country's new administration.
In another development, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a security briefing atop a strategic Syrian mountain inside the UN-patrolled buffer zone on the Golan Heights that Israel seized this month. In a video statement from the summit, Netanyahu said Israeli troops will remain there until another solution ensuring Israel's security is found.
We are here to assess the situation in order to decide on Israel's deployment in this important location until another arrangement is found that guarantees Israel's security.
Meanwhile, Syria is slowly returning to normalcy after Assad's ouster. Drone footage showed nightlife returning to the streets of the capital, Damascus. The first Syrian domestic flight after the ouster of Assad took off from the Damascus International Airport bound for Aleppo.
The readiness is excellent. We are fully ready. The international operation just needs some procedures, but we are ready.
After over a week of far-reaching changes in Syria, the world is watching to see how soon will stability return to the West Asian nation. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
On to a big development coming in from West Asia. Hamas is reportedly concerned that US President-elect Donald Trump will allow Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to resume fighting in Gaza after the first phase of the three-stage ceasefire, currently in advanced negotiations, is completed. The US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, said last week that the Biden administration is trying to secure a ceasefire deal by the end of this month. This means that US President-elect Donald Trump, who assumes office next month, will oversee the remaining phase of the ceasefire deal. Earlier this week, Trump said that he wants the Gaza war to end. But an Israeli official reportedly told the Israeli newspaper, The Times of Israel, that Netanyahu is of the view that he will have more flexibility and control over Trump and that he can resume fighting in Gaza after the first phase. Hamas reportedly has made a similar assessment and is looking for assurances that Israel will not restart the war after the first phase of the ceasefire has been completed. Reportedly, the nature of the ceasefire deal is still a major contention. Hamas is basically demanding a permanent end to the war, along with complete withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza. Israel, on the other hand, is reportedly looking for a temporary pause in which some hostages could be released, followed by the resumption of the war. US, Qatari, and Egyptian mediators have reportedly worked to get the first phase of the deal in motion. In the first phase, the release of the remaining living female, elderly and wounded hostages will be carried out in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during this first phase, Israel and Hamas will hold discussions on the terms for the second and third phases of the ceasefire. As per reports, Hamas is reportedly flexible on certain terms of the ceasefire deal and is prepared to allow Israeli troops to remain in the key Philadelphia and Netzarim corridors during the first phase of the deal. The Philadelphia corridor is a 14-kilometer long stretch situated along the entirety of the border between Gaza and Egypt. Meanwhile, the Netzarim corridor is a 4-kilometer wide corridor which splits the Gaza Strip down the middle. Remember, these two corridors have been a major point of contention between Hamas and Israel and was one of the reasons, the many reasons, why the two sides have not been able to agree on a ceasefire on multiple occasions. Will the possibility of this looming ceasefire actually bring some kind of peace for West Asia or resemblance of it? Or will it just be a pause in the ongoing war? Switching gears, left-leaning European leaders are facing a crisis of confidence as they struggle to maintain public support. Leaders like Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz, Pedro Sanchez are witnessing a significant drop in popularity, sparking concerns about their leadership and the future of European politics. In the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's approval ratings have nosedived. A recent Ipsos survey has revealed that while 61% have expressed dissatisfaction with his performance, only 27% have expressed satisfaction. And this, by the way, has made him the most unpopular Prime Minister after 5 months in 10 Downing Street since the late 1970s. Quite a record. In France, meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron's government has been facing significant challenges after his party's defeat in the 2024 European Parliament elections and the disastrous performance in the snap polls. In a bid to stabilize France and steer its economy, Macron has appointed François Bayrou as the new prime minister. The appointment comes after Michel Barnier's government was toppled in a no-confidence vote following tensions over the public finances. While centrist leader Bayrou's top priority is to get France's 2025 budget approved without facing a no-confidence vote, Macron recently vowed to remain in office till the end of his 5-year term in May 2027. Meanwhile, speaking to a French newspaper, the National Rally leader Marine Le Pen has reportedly said that President Macron will soon be forced to quit, which would pave the way for an early presidential election. According to her, referring to Macron, she further said, reportedly, and I'm quoting, he has lost his grip internationally. He has fallen out with everyone. He no longer has any influence in the European Union and was humiliated in the worst manner by von der Leyen. You see, Le Pen's comments have raised speculation that she might be prepared to join the push for a second confidence vote in the government that is expected to be formed this week. Previously, she had been thought unlikely to back a push to topple another government this soon after the ouster of Michel Barnier, the former Prime Minister. And what's more, according to reports, such a move would risk undermining her image as a responsible politician of the right, which has been carefully cultivated over more than a decade to win the voters' confidence. Meanwhile, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is also facing heat after his three-party coalition government collapsed due to a budget dispute. Scholz lost a confidence vote in the Bundestag in November with 394 ballots against him, 207 in his favor, 116 abstentions. Germany now heads for snap elections on February 23rd, 2025, with Scholz hoping to win and form a new coalition under his leadership. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is facing a tough time as well, dealing with several legal investigations involving those close to him, including his wife, brother, former transport minister. His wife is accused of corruption and influence peddling related to her time at Madrid's Complutense University, while his brother David is being investigated for embezzlement, influence peddling and tax fraud. Former Transport Minister Jose Luis Abalos is under investigation for allegedly taking kickbacks for contracts during the COVID-19 pandemic. While the investigations have led to increased scrutiny and in a way dented the image of Sanchez's leftist government, he and his Socialist Party have dismissed the cases as baseless and part of a right-wing smear campaign. Recently, the Spanish left-wing parliamentary bloc has temporarily blocked a proposal for a no-confidence vote against the Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. The proposal was put forward by Together for Catalonia party. With the rise of far-right parties across Europe, leaving many left-leaning leaders struggling to connect with voters in a way amid the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war and the West Asia developments, it remains to be seen if European left-leaning leaders can actually make a comeback. On to India. The harshest period of cold is yet to start in the Kashmir Valley, but the continuous dip in temperatures leading to severe cold wave conditions across Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. The sub-zero temperatures in the valley have led to the freezing of many water bodies. Our next report telling you more.
Drung waterfall close to Gulmarg has frozen completely and turned into a movie scene from the film Frozen. The area has recorded temperatures well below zero over the last few days. The mercury dipped to -12. Hundreds of tourists are visiting the waterfall to witness the unique scene of the frozen waterfall, and the whole place looks no less than a winter wonderland.
It's very nice here, and I come from Rajasthan, and this frozen waterfall is so amazing to look at, and we are enjoying the cold. It's very lovely here, and Kashmir is so beautiful, and only when you visit you realize how beautiful it is. We have only seen these things in films, and Kashmir in reality is much more beautiful.
Basically, I belong to Rajasthan and I travel a lot. I have seen Himachal and many other places which have snow, but the experience we have had here is very different, unique and beautiful. People should come here. And the frozen waterfall behind me in Drung Valley is so unique, and I have seen such a waterfall for the first time. I'll tell everyone that they should come and visit Kashmir.
While the locals have been eagerly waiting for intense cold wave conditions to end, tourists visiting are enjoying every bit of it. The Kashmir Valley's Met Department has predicted the rising impact of the La Nina effect. Officials say the winter period will prolong and will be harsh in terms of temperature as well as rains and snow. Heading towards the Chillai Kalan, which is the coldest period of 40 days starting December 21st, the La Nina effect will multiply the impact of cold and precipitation in the valley.
The Met Department now has predicted that 21st onward, there's going to be chances of precipitation, which means rain and snow over the higher reaches, which will bring some relief from the intense cold wave conditions. With video journalist Firoz Idris Lone for WION World is One.
Meanwhile, India has achieved a major milestone in deep sea exploration. In December 2024, a team from the National Institute of Ocean Technology and the National Center for Polar and Ocean Research conducted a successful expedition aboard the research vessel Sagar Nidhi. Using the autonomous underwater vehicle, scientists mapped hydrothermal sulfide fields at a depth of 4,500 meters in the central and southwest Indian ridges of the southern Indian Ocean. This is the first time high-resolution imaging has been carried out at these specific sites. The expedition uncovered ecosystems and valuable mineral deposits like gold, silver and copper, findings that support India's deep ocean mission and the country's goal of harnessing marine resources sustainably for future growth. India's latest deep-sea expedition marks a significant step in marine exploration. The high-resolution images and data captured offering new insights into deposits of gold, silver and copper. This groundbreaking mission is part of the broader Deep Ocean Mission, aimed at developing technology to explore and sustainably harness ocean resources. The Union Minister emphasized that such explorations are critical for India's economic growth and its vision for 2047. These findings paving the way for future missions, including the upcoming Samudrayan project, which will dive even deeper to 6,000 meters below sea level. Shifting focus, Sunita Williams and her fellow astronaut Butch Wilmore will have to wait some more for their return to planet Earth. The two US astronauts, stranded for months on the International Space Station, will remain there at least until late March, as NASA announced another delay in the mission to get them back home. Wilmore and Williams arrived at the ISS in June aboard Boeing Starliner spacecraft and were due to spend 8 days on the orbiting laboratory. But NASA had to change the plan after problems arose with the Starliner's propulsion system during the flight there. NASA has decided to bring the two stranded astronauts back home with the members of a SpaceX mission called Crew 9. Crew 9's two astronauts arrived at the ISS aboard a Dragon spacecraft in late September with 2 empty seats for Wilmore and Williams. The plan was for all 4 to return home in February 2025. But NASA has said that Crew 10, which would relieve Crew 9 and the stranded pair, would now launch no earlier than March next year, March 2025. And both teams would remain on board for a handover period. And this would mean that Wilmore and Williams will spend more than 9 months in space rather than 8 days as initially planned. SpaceX, the private company founded by Elon Musk, has been flying regular missions every 6 months to allow the rotation of ISS crews. Latin America and the Caribbean, despite representing just 8% of the world's population, account for nearly 1/3 of global homicides. Today, we explored the toll that crime takes on Latin America and the strategies that could break this vicious cycle. Take a look.
Latin America and the Caribbean, despite accounting for just 8% of the world's population, represent nearly 1/3 of global homicides. Crime and violence in the region severely hinder economic progress. Research from the Inter-American Development Bank and the International Monetary Fund shows that crime costs the region 3.4% of its GDP each year. This loss comes from productivity declines due to deaths, injuries and incarceration, along with private and public security expenses. These costs are equivalent to 80% of public education budgets and double social assistance spending, putting a massive strain on the region's financial resources. The economic impact of crime extends beyond direct costs.
Crime discourages investment, reduces tourism, and accelerates emigration, which weakens economic resilience. Studies show that if homicide rates in violent municipalities were reduced by half, their economic output could increase by up to 30%. At the regional level, reducing homicide rates to the global average could boost Latin America's annual GDP growth by 0.5%. However, macroeconomic instability worsens the situation. Recessions and inflation spikes are linked to significant increases in violence, creating a dangerous cycle of stagnation. To break this cycle, IMF enlists comprehensive strategies. Effective economic policies, including low inflation, robust social safety nets, and expanded access to education and employment, can reduce inequality and violence. Countries must also address illicit financial flows and organized crime. Successful examples such as Jamaica's economic reforms and crime reduction initiatives in Argentina and Honduras show that targeted, coordinated efforts can lower crime rates and strengthen public confidence. Regional collaboration is also crucial as crime networks operate across borders, requiring unified efforts to restore economic stability and public safety. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
We've often heard people say wine is good for the heart. A new scientific study claims to have solved that big question. Is that really true? A team at the University of Barcelona found that a glass of wine every night halves the risk of suffering heart attacks and strokes compared with people who don't consume the drink. The study claims drinking a bottle of wine a week could be as good for you as taking cholesterol-lowering drugs. The team also observed that wine, red or white, has a much greater protective effect than previously thought. The new research tested the amount of a chemical called tartaric acid in the participants' urine. Tartaric acid basically is a chemical naturally found in grapes that can be measured in urine to show how much wine someone has consumed over the previous 5 to 6 days. The cohort was a group of over 1,000 Spanish adults who were at high risk of heart disease. They gave urine samples to measure their wine consumption and were also put on a Mediterranean diet involving lots of olive oil, vegetables and fish. Compared with non-drinkers, those who had between 3 and 7 glasses of wine each week had a 50% lower risk. Meanwhile, those who drank 1 to 3 glasses a week were at 38% lower risk of heart disease. But here's the catch. The protective effect that wine had disappeared in anyone drinking more than a glass a day. The research team says it has gathered enough evidence on wine consumption by measuring tartaric acid in urine samples. Researchers also noticed it was crucial to consume wine during meals. The study sticks to the UK's current guidelines, which advised no more than 14 units of alcohol per week. That measures to 6 pints of beer or 6 small glasses of wine. Another interesting takeaway is that women only need to consume drink half the amount that as men to get the same protective effects. The so-called French paradox of why Mediterranean countries known for their love of wine have lower rates of heart disease has puzzled scientists for decades. While wine might be good for the heart, experts have of course cautioned that consumption of too much wine is not good for the heart. The study says if you drink over 35 glasses of wine a month, this protective benefit of wine will quickly disappear and turn detrimental for your health. A watch worn by French wartime hero and President Charles de Gaulle fetched more than €500,000 as part of an auction in Paris. That's nearly $500,000. Our next report telling you more about the auction sale.
C'est la montre du général de Gaulle. Il n'y en a qu'une dans la vente.
This is General de Gaulle's watch. There is only one in the sale. The watch is a manufacturer of the Lip Factory, a large French manufacturer in Besançon, and it is the watch that the general wore in the 60s until the end of his life. It is quite simple, like him, and he particularly appreciated, obviously, French products and manufacturers. So this is what he had on his wrist. We can also see the wear around the bracelet. He wore it a lot, but it remains in very good condition.
Autour du bracelet, il l'a beaucoup porté, mais elle reste en très bel état.
It's moving because all this is part of history. You feel the emotion from all these objects of everyday life which forged the general's character for the liberation of France.
Des objets de la vie quotidienne.
China's space program achieved a major milestone as 2 astronauts aboard the Tiangong space station set a new world record for the longest spacewalk. The 9-hour extravehicular activity by Shenzhou 19 crew members surpassed a 22-year-old record held by the US. China Manned Space Agency saying the astronauts worked tirelessly for 9 hours installing a debris protection device and inspecting equipment and the facilities. The Shenzhou 19 crew is set to continue their 6-month mission, conducting space science experiments, technical tests, and additional extravehicular activities. Take a look. And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the US.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
West African leaders from the regional group ECOWAS meet for a summit with 3 nation members led by military governments on the brink of quitting the bloc. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger reaffirm as irreversible their decision to quit the group. Human rights groups condemn police action in Kenya after hundreds of activists held peaceful protests in the streets of Nairobi against the rise in femicide cases in the country. And 160 athletes, including 40 young women, gather in the Kimana Reserve for the Maasai Olympics. The event serves to replace the traditional Olamayo, a Maasai rite of passage that involves group lion hunting for young Maasai men to prove their skills, identify their leaders and attract girlfriends. World of Africa at these times on WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One. In a year that reshaped the world, 2024 brought seismic shifts, bold moves, and unforgettable moments that will echo through history around the globe. Wars continued to ravage nations, but new alliances and power shifts began to rewrite the rules of geopolitics. 2024 also bore witness to nature's fury. Climate change fueled deadly wildfires, devastating floods, and unprecedented storms. Devastating wars to technological revolutions. 2024 was the year that changed everything. The Game Changers 2024. The year that reshaped our future. Only on WION. World is One.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the US.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution,